Welcome, everybody, to another episode of DNS Unfiltered. Today, I'm joined by James Oliverio. James, how are you today?
I'm good, Mikey. Thanks for let me join your podcast today.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. So, James is actually a customer. His company, IdeaBox, is part of the DNS Filter family. So, it's really great to have you. We're not going to do a sales pitch or anything. I really wanted to understand your thoughts on like AI and data, like exfiltration. I understand you're doing a lot of things to kind of mitigate what people are doing accidentally with AI these days. So I wanted to get into that.
Yeah,
But first,
sure.
tell the audience how you went from climbing like the divisional uh, chief information officer ladder on Wall Street, and what banking had taught you about risk and the security industry, or what the security industry gets wrong.
Yeah. Well, look, I spent multiple decades for sure. I started in the '80s with an investment bank with a PC cart on a trading floor investment bank, and within that bank, it was kind of a nothing of a bank, but it grew. I grew with it. I became the chief information officer of a firm called Donaldson, Lufkin and Jenrette. Um, that bank was purchased of Credit Suisse in 2000, 2001 timeframe. And I kind of stayed on board for about a year through the kind of, the merger. And I was invited to go with 9 investment bankers to UBS, which I did. And my winning formula didn't win so well with that over that culture either. So those bankers said, go start a business. I said, what do I know about starting a business? So back in the early 2000s, I started an MSP, not known as MSP, at Break Fix. Those bankers started their own companies. They became my clients. So I started getting the operation business of uptime. One of my companies was called Another Nine. 99% uptime is great, but that's 87 hours downtime. 99.999, it's less than 5 minutes of downtime. So I ran that business out to about 2015. I had investment firms, investment advisors, investment banks, medical firms. Um, Sold it for a nice exit. During my quiet period, I was invited to join a program at Harvard University on mitigating risk in the information age. Said, interesting. What's this about? What's the curriculum? You have to be technical, non-technical program. So I'm a technical guy. So I go into this program with 300 other colleagues of mine, and we pull apart Sony, Target, Equifax, the NSA, and go, what did they get right? What did they get wrong? Right. So 3 things I took away from that program, which I use today, and it'll tie into why I started IdeaBox. One was, you can't be the CIO and the CISO. Separation of duties. And I thought, hey, the CIO owns this. Like, no way. And I go, well, they got it wrong. Sony, Target, Equifax. They had all the great stack, but because they were operating it and securing it, they ignored the alerts. So I believe out of that program, every major institution we know of today follows that edict. The CISO reports into maybe legal compliance or the board of directors. The CIO doesn't have responsibility over that role anymore. Go check it out. 2, the data that was stolen wasn't the databases. It was the unstructured data in Word documents, PDF documents, data that they had no clue was littered across their organization, was stolen, reassembled outside, and threat actors figured out how to pounce, if you will, like get into those organizations, right, and steal their data. Lastly, how do you make sense of all this tech jargon? Well, that's where a concept which I took and ran with, ROM, ROM, return on mitigation. ROI measures what you gain, ROM measures what you didn't lose. So I started focusing on, how do I create this conversation? I'm now known as the ROM whisperer in the marketplace, to reach out to the C-suite, educate boards about, this tech thing is really confusing. Well, let's unconfuse you, right? Let's get you straight on it. You need to only, as a board member, ask this one fundamental question. What data do we create, digest, creates our greatest vulnerability? What does that look like? What would the what would a breach look like? What would the cost of a breach look like if it were to occur to our organization? If you can't even come close to answering that question, hit the pause button. Don't spend any more in tech. Get everybody in the room and say, what would it cost? What would it look like? Because every major breach I've been studied or been a part of, when they peel it back, they look at the costs, they look at the data, and it becomes tens and hundreds of millions of dollars devalued on the company. And that's who I am. So I created IdeaBox around just the sole purpose, make it a safer world for companies to conduct their business. So I always fundamentally coach companies into, let me ask you a question. Can you keep the records on your employees safe, like their date of birth, their health proxies that they signed, their offer letters? Can you keep that data safe? Because if you can't keep that data safe, what makes you think you can keep safe the third party agreements that you absorbed on a daily basis, someone's patent or trademark? So let's get real, right? So I get into the grill of some of these companies. Can you survive a breach? What does that look like? And I built a ecosystem with this company called Actifile that it does that, identifies the sensitive data, quantifies it, and oh, by the way, tracks its use up to large language models. Are you putting the company at risk? What guardrails should we think about considering we want people to leverage AI? AI is not the bad guy. AI just extends the blast radius. It's the data that's sensitive that creates your greatest risk as a company. And I'm trying to get more and more people focused around that concept, right? The tech stack in cybersecurity is vast. There's hundreds, if not thousands of products. I want them to focus on, what does it look like? What does that data look like? Can I get my hands around it? Can I mitigate it?
What
Simple.
do you think? What do you think changes? Like if a company were to go and take adopt a mindset of return on mitigation, like how much a breach costs versus how much it's going to cost me to prevent a breach. What do they do differently? How do they decide to spend differently on security when they have that mindset?
I've taken several through it. So the outcomes are, I call it the boardroom shift. So it looks like very fundamentally when they get us engaged, we identify what that rubric looks like, what the data expense looks like. And then when you start putting some fences around that data by controlling it, for example, I've had a company that we detected $90 million of data risk. When we put some controls in place, we reduced it down to 2% without causing any friction. So what does that mean? The actual files themselves are protected at a file level. But if it's ever exfiltrated, it can't be used against them. But now they take that snapshot on a quarterly basis into their boardroom and they say, listen, we've been hovering around 90 million. There was a point in time where we went up to a billion. And we found out that these files that came into the organization came in through email. And when we looked at analyzed those files, they were spreadsheets that were 500 and 600,000 rows of patient data. They never knew they work this way. That data can come their way unsuspecting through an attachment. And once we show that, we educate that market. So they're able, as a case study, they're mitigating risk on a regular basis. They reduced it. And, we've got other examples of the technology able to, kind of plug holes.
So no one really puts a value on their data. Like you're talking about a spreadsheet attachment in the email. Like no one's gonna think much about that. It's gonna probably live in that email in that
Again, so
system. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So how we came about that is that Actifile, myself, and a governing a non it's a non let's say I'd say it's a non for profit. It's called the Fair Institute. It's a very large group that analyzes breaches, the legal costs, the reputational costs, the compliance costs that go into it, and we took their algorithms. So, for example, we detect 5,000 date of birth records in your environment. They value a date of birth record at $10. So it's 10 times 5,000. Credit card is valued at $100. We found 2,500 credit card numbers in your systems times 100, so on and so forth. So we pull from FAIR into our back end and based on the records and the files, we do a computation. So it goes up to a dashboard. So when a file Says, I've got 100 date of births in it, records in it, and we now protected it. You take that 100 times $1,000, now it becomes zero, remediated.
Why do you think people are underestimating that unstructured data so much? Because like, as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I've never really thought about much about those files, but like, why are we doing that? Like,
I'll be the first to admit it. 4.5 years ago, as my social media presence around return on mitigation and unstructured data was stolen, et cetera, Actifall reached out and said, "We think we can align with you. We built this tool." So I said, "Baloney, you can't identify and quantify data through single pane of glass. Baloney, baloney, baloney." So they said, "No, James, try it." So I take this agent. So personally, I look at this dashboard after I put the agent on my machine, $27 million of data risk. That's false. I don't have data on my machine. But then I lean forward and went, wait a minute. It's not on my machine, but I'm connected to it. So as I followed the link, it was a Dropbox link to my attorney. It was our merger and acquisition deal room of all the companies and sensitive records of those companies in those deal rooms. And the light bulb moment went, uh-oh, someone's been listening. They built something to counter and fix this problem. And I jumped on the bandwagon. So it's one client, one conversation, multiple conversations, educating the markets. There are more and more people now waking up going, never thought about that. And when we do it, we call it a DRA, a data risk assessment. When we show them their data, they always typically go, what is this? Oh, these are passwords? Where is that payroll data? And they follow the crumbs going, well, that person's not supposed to have access to the payroll data. Well, they do. There you go. So it's happening. And that's why we built the market around that this technology is in the marketplace of thousands of MSPs, and we're pushing out thousands of licenses daily. But that's the license piece and the instrument piece of ActiveFile. But there's a component where ActiveFile is only one piece of the equation, where IdeaBox is really focusing on, you know, companies kind of how do they rubric this out completely with the data piece coupled with a written security information plan, a tabletop exercise. Are we training our people? You know, it's a combination of those things that we deliver as a service. But again, that's part of that journey that we take them on.
I'll give you a real life example from today, actually. So
Okay.
I make a lot of MCPs these days so that our team can access stuff right in their AI tooling, which is super handy, but also wrought with concern. So today I was creating a MCP connector for an HR system. And first I was scoping the app and the API that it could access for just this app. And there was probably 40 or so scopes. And I just determined that I need about 10 of those. But I went ahead and looked,
Mhm.
like, what are the other ones? Maybe there's some useful stuff in there. But there was also things like your dependent social security number, your spouse, your like all this stuff. And I was like, oh my, so I did the bare minimum. And before I've given anyone a chance to look at it, we've handed it over to our security team just to double check because it's such a sensitive area. So like there's this data that I'm connected to that we're going to connect the company to basically. And it's already, secured in this system. But as soon as we let it out of there, there's like a new vector where it could potentially be lost, stolen, et cetera. So it starts at the very foundation of what is allowed where.
Yeah. And again, if that was in a spreadsheet or Word document, PDF or other, that's exactly what we combat. That you can stay within your organization, share it, right? It's protected. But if it accidentally gets outside or ransomed inside your environment, the threat actors don't have a copy. So, perfect example, right? Several months ago, one of our clients panicked. The admin to one of our um, companies that use the technology, she was in a complete panic because they were going public with a directed share program. And she goes, "Oh my God, I just emailed the document with all the documents that people have to sign. And I noticed on the email list, I didn't recognize some of the names and they're not part of the program. Can we recall that document back?
Can you undo an email? No.
Can you
Thanks.
undo an email?" I go, "Nope, but here's the good thing. Are they outside the firm?" She goes, "Yeah, they're all people outside the firm." She's panicking like she's gonna lose her job. I start chuckling. Said, "Marianne, don't worry about it." I said, "Why?" "Because that file that you attached is encrypted. Only inside your organization, those people that are part of your organization can open it. Anybody outside of it, they can't. They're gonna receive it and probably call you going, 'Hey, you emailed me a file. I
I
can't
can't
open
open
it.'"
it.
That's a perfect example. When that that's an oopsie. That happens all the time, right? You're working really quick, you fat finger a really important document, you notice it. Well, those are my golfing buddies, and I just emailed the strategic plan of an acquisition we're making. These are real life examples, right? What do you do? Like, you're not gonna report yourself, right? But this tool kind of, in this case, bailed them out. But, I'm going to continue to kind of push the message and the agenda of return on mitigation, right? Data risk assessments, um, what you can do to prepare yourself to deal with a cyber breach. That's why DNS filters in our portfolio, right? Where when we've got a managed security client, that we put that in there. We don't itemize what we do and say, this is what you're paying for. You're buying a service. It's a very important piece that we sell a value proposition that there is a breach. We deal with the incident response. The DNS filter has kind of prevented, in some cases, a catastrophe where someone clicked on something, think before you click, right? And blocked it or prevented it, right? Kept it clean.
Yeah, and
And we just say,
it's kind of the same scenario. Like you're protecting us from ourselves. That's what DNS filter does.
yeah, yeah. And I try to explain to people too on the DNS filter front is that, look, you know, you never know what systems you're using because it's all cloud based that they get compromised. And that's exactly what you solve for, right? Whereas traditionally predates these types of technologies, you'd have to set up your firewall and do all those kinds of things. And you always find out in the rearview mirror that, oh, geez, that organization got compromised and they were collecting a bunch of stuff through the website. You guys are out there as part of an ecosystem of preventing that happening. I've had many times over the years of using DNS filter, why can't I get into my payroll system? I said, it blocked it, blocked it, blocked it. Let's call your payroll company. They got compromised. That's why. And we prevented it. Really? How many, I mean, dozens of those over the last few years that's happened. Like, this is a website I use all the time. Why isn't the thing not let me go there? Because that's what it's supposed to do. Let's find out. Let's peel it back. Oh my God. Because you really can't be in someone else's systems, but that's what you guys really solve for sure.
That's good to hear. I do have a question about kind of that selling motion. When you're in like a conversation, selling conversation with like a CEO or a board, is there anything that really lands with them when you're talking about cyber risk?
Some of it would, I am starting to get attention around return on mitigation because everyone knows ROI and they are starting to listen to what we have to say. And the workshops I've hosted for some boards are around preparing a board member about they should think about the cyber challenges, right? It's not if, it's when, and what should I do as a board member? Definitely mandate that, you know, companies have a written information security plan. Definitely encourage a separation of duties around security and operating it. Definitely make sure there's an incident response plan in that, and definitely push on key systems, look at the interdependencies and do a tabletop exercise or two. If I leave them with that, and if a framework hasn't been chosen, here's a couple of frameworks you should consider. CSF up to some more elaborate ones. And when they say, what is a framework? Think of it as a roadmap of saying, what does this all mean? It's just depending on your industry. These are not specific around industry. It's just a good way of testing your IT people that are they following some guidelines, best practices, and getting the evidence around that. So if I've done that piece, naturally other things give away that information. They'll buy into other solutions as well, bringing along for the party.
And I've seen in some of your, I don't know what you call it, literature posts, whatever, that you were saying that about 70% of companies don't really have a strategy like you're describing right there.
No, it's
So
shocking.
when you take on someone new, what do you typically find first? I imagine you could just run the agent, run something and say, give them like a little
Well,
graph
the agent's
dashboard or something.
one piece of it, but if like I say, "Can you pull out your written information security plan?" They don't have it. Can you
Right.
can you pull out your SSP? What's that? The security plan around that if you get vaporized, can someone replicate and put this environment back together? Like, what's the blueprint, right? Certainly larger, mid-size, or regulated businesses have to have those documents in place, especially in healthcare and financial services. But those quick questions go quickly and then says, if they allow us to put some instruments out there, we'll tell them what's going on within their environment quickly within 7 to 10 days. And I could do it off the paper through our calculator, our ROM calculator, just put the industry up, how many users. I'll give them a sense of what the range will be. They're always shocked. Like, there's no way I have tens of millions of data risk. What does that tens of millions of data risk translate to? You have PII or PHI or other records that quantify up to thousands, tens of thousands of records and files. And they go, no, 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 can't be. Yeah, you'll see.
Like,
I,
did you
I,
get my
I've
email?
I've done hundreds and hundreds of data risk assessments. I've had over 1,100 phone calls through certain AI tools that we bring to the party, like Fathom and recorders. So we go back to those recordings. And yeah, when you look back at the history, like I love these AI tools, 1,100 sessions on this topic in the last 18 months between myself and a couple of my colleagues that on the topic of ROM, on the topic of unstructured data, on the topic of what does risk look like if it were to occur to us? Like, what would the cost of a breach be, right? I mean, statistically, IBM says it's 5.56 million per breach. Larger companies can be tenfold that. But, that's the typical these are the stats that are out there.
So you brought up the magic word, AI, which is where I live most days. Um, so AI is really changing things rapidly, but I'm curious where you see AI helping defenders like us and where that kind of AI train is a little bit of hype.
We we use a form of it, right, that to quantify and identify where the flows go and, troubleshoot with certain tools like Claude and Manus and Perplexity to do things on the back end. But yeah, I mean, that horse has left the barn. I will just say that organizations have to get with it real quick, get out ahead of it. What data is unstructured that AI has access to, and is it appropriate? If they don't start doing that, that's their vulnerability.
How
And
big would you say that problem is
it
in your
I
experience?
couldn't even quantify it. It's
It's like off the charts.
it's off the charts, right? We haven't seen any of the legal stuff hit our way yet. But I'll say it this way: firms have third party agreements to keep certain information private. We know they're in violation. I'm asserting to you, most of them are. They need to go out and do an assessment that where that data sits that they're supposed to keep, and is it accessible by people using these AI tools? And it's okay to keep it contained, but are they using it externally? Right? Is Copilot combing through and doing the full text searching and throwing it up to my Azure backend, keeping it contained, or is it going up to public networks? They really should start getting out ahead of it. And I'm sure the IT people are still trying to come up to speed, but I think IT guys, unfortunately, our colleagues, they're operating. They're trying to find how to use the AI tools at the same time. It's hard. It's a balancing act. So, I certainly pick out 2 to 3 hours a day to focus on elements of how do you utilize these tools effectively and how it could share some of that wealth of knowledge. And it's evolving exponent. I mean, you can't stay ahead of it. It's the use of the tool, how you leverage it for good use, not obviously, where threat actors use it against companies.
Let's dig in a minute on your, I guess, like theory ethos about IT um, audits, passing IT audits, but actually failing AI governance reviews. It seems like it's kind of common sense when I read something that you wrote. I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. But can you dive a little deeper on it?
Yeah, it's just look, it's like anything else. They passed their audit, right? Somebody said the artifacts are there, but they really never put it to the true test, and they're missing this whole other element. What just came in through email? Who just went up to a website and pulled something down? That's unstructured. What's been abandoned down on workstations in the downloads folder, right? They ever really flush that out. What's being shared with certain websites and large language models? I have dashboards that show all of those metrics and let the client decide, well, they naturally say, well, I want that protected. Click, click, click. Are we creating walls for our people to expand? No. In fact, we're making it as frictionless as possible. It's data loss prevention technology in a way that I like to refer to it. My competition's Blockbuster, we're Netflix in the sector. It's really that simple. We built a different mousetrap.
And I was going to ask you if you were building that mousetrap today, idea box today instead of 2018, I think it was. What would you do? What would you build differently, knowing like this new AI world and other things we've been seeing recently?
Look, most of my business is failure. I failed along the way since 2018. So
Yeah.
that's a broad question. What would I do there? I mean, I think I'm doing it now. I've learned from some of the mistakes and some of the good comments here that have come out is exactly that. Trying to educate the markets on, you know, it's just not a single solution. It's not a single instrument. It's not as I talked about instruments as tools, and I think it's when you look at cyber in general, I'm going to come from the prism of you could have a great tech stack. The best of them had it. I'm going to keep them purely focused on what's controllable. And I think try to get out ahead and get some sense of what data is sitting out there. What's out there in those enclaves, what's out up on the cloud, what's on the workstations. I'll keep preaching that, and I'll keep bringing that to light about how do you assemble that data, and that's a big focus of the core. When I think about an organization like a bank with a vault, and the vault being the data, and we know the combo and all that stuff. What's in the vault is you should always know what's in there, what's fluid, and that's a different concept of you know cyber's always been treated as perimeter, 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 least access. You know, well, we know that doesn't work. They're going to get in, right? You know, what we've built, my partners, myself, Actifile, we've built something as an ecosystem that even if they take that money out of the vault, the minute they go, the packs go off, the money's rendered useless. They can't get to they can't get to your core, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, just like your was it Miriam's email? Like, don't worry, Miriam. It was
Exactly.
you were not allowed to shoot yourself in the foot.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, I have 5 rapid fire questions. You ready? I think I know
Sure.
the answer to the first one. All right. ROI or ROM?
What about it? I'm a
Which
ROM.
one? Yeah.
Oh, look, it's ROM for us, obviously. ROM's return on mitigation. Let's get you focused on, you know, what you think that those parameters look like at some point in time, and we can carry that out for on a real time basis. But get you focused around that and mitigate, make investments to get that against that to get your greatest return of loss. Mitigate that,
All right.
mitigate risk mitigation.
Yeah, I figured. I figured. But I asked anyway. So, next question, the breach that scares you more, ransomware or just quiet data exfiltration?
Quiet data exfiltration. You never that's the scariest piece. You know, the ransomware event pops up, you can figure out what you deal with it, but I would say that quiet leakage, it's oof, could choke you for
What is
me.
one what's one tool that every business should turn on this week?
Actify. No, it
Right?
it no, it would be it could be it's a combination. You know, I don't know if it's a tool. I think it's a process. You know, get build out their rubric. I don't know if it's a tool. Even though Actifol is a tool and instrument, we gotta make sure it's a fit. Let's do your let's if I had to say tool, I would say, look, assess your do a DRA, that data risk assessment.
Yeah, it's like the what you don't know.
Right.
You and it's also like security comes in layers. There's no one tool. There's, process is part of those layers. So yeah, that's
Yep.
kind of a loaded question, but I like it. All right, next one. Most overrated word in cybersecurity marketing
You know, I don't most overrated word?
or acronym. There's a lot of acronyms I hate.
God. Um, I don't have one actually. I don't know. Never really thought about it.
Love them all. That's good.
You know,
Uh,
there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, right? I don't know. I really haven't thought about that. That's a good one.
that's actually the correct answer. Good job.
Really?
Yeah, that's the correct answer. No, I'm just kidding. There is no correct answers here.
Yeah.
Last one. Wall Street CIO James or founder James, which one had more fun?
I had a great time. I mean, even Wall Street kinda gave me, a great look, that whole experience coming up as a young buck with some really, really smart people, um, I learned so much from them. I learned my biggest takeaway was it's all about the people. It's the culture. And it was a great environment at DLJ. To this day, we still, it's 25 years since the company got sold. A lot of the bankers still get together. It's great to see old colleagues, stay connected. It was a fraternity. So I think, that, how you treat people, how you treat others, and you're not going to have all the answers. You're going to speak from the future back to the present, have a vision that dovetailed into my businesses, and it always carries through. And, working with great people, it's, w- without DLJ and those early days wouldn't have been, my entrepreneurship run wouldn't have been the same. But I will say, I think Wall Street kind of takes the life out of you because you're always on a plane somewhere doing stuff. Whereas when you're in your business, it's the kind of same thing. You're still burning candle at both ends, but I don't know if I would have been the coach to my kids' plan, yeah, coach my kids, being able to do the things I was able to do as an owner of a business where you're working for for a larger company. It's a tough
Yeah,
balancing
so
act.
there was a work-life balance aspect
It,
of that for sure.
yeah, it definitely. I think in retrospect, being able to run for school board and be part of your kids' stuff. I mean, look, I may not look it, but I've got 3 grandchildren. I mean, so it's to go through that, that experience, be part of their lives, it's, nothing like it.
Thank you for hopping on with me today, James. But where can people find you on the interwebs if they want to reach out and say,
No,
hey,
look, the easiest thing is james at ideabox.com or my website, www.ideabox, ideabox.com. Learn more about us. And of course, find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, I mean, best to reach us.
yeah, and you have a pending request in your inbox right now from me.
Hey, I did. I accepted it.
Oh, good, good. Right before the show. Well, thank you,
Awesome.
James. We appreciate it. We appreciate you being part of DNS Filters family and for hopping on today. Thanks so much.
No, thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.